Chapter 33. Determining Fairy Winner. The Valley of the Great Formation set up by Shi Yan. The ancient sea-flying boat slowly sailed away. It's not good, brother-in-law. I feel a calamity. Long Wenyu suddenly frowned. Oh. Gu Hai looked at Long Wenyu suspiciously. I don't know. Anyway, keep going. It seems like there is a calamity, but it's not big. There is a certain evil omen. Long Wenyu frowned. Fierce omen. Who can you foresee? Gu Hai said gruffly. Long Wenyu, sensing a fierce omen, was not a simple matter. It had to be treated with care. Let's see. It just so happens that this month's prophecy hasn't been used yet. Long Wenyu immediately stared. In her right eye, a burst of blue light steeply emerged. Ah, it's him. That. The last time outside of Chaos City. Ah, I remember. Qin Zibai. Qin Zibai will still come out and find us in trouble. Brother-in-law, there's Qin Zibai. Long Wenyu worriedly said. Qin Zibai. Gu Hai's eyes narrowed slightly. Long Wenyu nodded. Stop. Gu Hai called a halt to the flying boat. Gu Hai was only at the Yuanying realm, and only at the first level of the Yuanying realm. Leading the crowd to deal with Shi Yan was already a risk. After all, that Shi Yan was a strong person of the Open Heaven Palace. And even if he was in the Lower Heaven Palace, he was not comparable to the Yuanying realm. Gu Hai was thinking of countermeasures along the way. At this moment, he heard Long Wenyu say that there was another Qin Zibai. That's the one who opened the Middle Heavenly Palace. Last time in Chogai, he had mobilized the power of a country to scare him. Qin Zibai, in their own previous calculations, will be all in vain. Your Majesty, why don't we wait for Shi Yan to fall alone before we deal with him? Rulu advised. Gu Hai shook his head. If in normal times, Gu Hai would naturally wait for He Yan to fall alone, but at this moment, he was a little worried. He Yan and Qin Zibai's big formation trapped who? Les Miserables. Would it be Fairy Wanna? No matter what attitude Fairy Wanna had towards herself, but, after all, she was already her own woman. There's no need. I'll make the arrangements. You guys do as you're told, Gu Hai said in a deep voice. Yes, the crowd responded. You guys immediately head to Dragon Vein City and release the news that the Dragon Vein has appeared right now. Gu Hai was in the middle of arranging to the crowd. The Gu Hai flying boat continued to head towards that valley. It didn't take long before the large formation could already be seen from afar. Brother-in-law, we can't go any further. It's still dangerous. I feel like it's still an evil omen. Long Wenyu worried. I know. Don't worry. Sima Feng, you guys set up a book path formation to protect Wenyu. Gu Hai said in a deep voice. Yes. Brother-in-law, you're going alone. Long Wenyu was worried. Don't worry. Gu Hai shook his head. Boom. Gu Hai jumped off the flying boat from afar. Underneath the ground, the Foothills Stone Man was in the middle of arranging the formation as requested by Gu Hai. The flying boat stopped at a hidden corner, and Sima Feng began to set up the Book Dao formation. Gu Hai, however, stepped alone and slowly walked towards the distant large formation. Not far away, Li Shenji was on top of a mountain peak. My lord, it's here. Is it really Gu Hai? It's actually only one person, a subordinate said in surprise. Li Shenji's eyes narrowed slightly. One person. Hey, it's impossible for Gu Hai to be alone. The others must be hiding. It doesn't matter. Qin Zibai and Shi Yan moved to kill. Gu Hai won't be able to escape, Li Shenji said in a cold voice. Above another mountain peak, the white-clothed boy also narrowed his eyes slightly, seeing Gu Hai slowly walking towards the direction of the grand formation in the distance. It's him, Qing Feng said in steep surprise. Oh, you recognize, the white-clothed boy said in doubt. Young lord, it's him. I've seen his portrait. What was said earlier? The one who set up the grand formation and coalesced the Duchess. It's him. A trace of surprise flashed in Qing Feng's eyes and said, "It's him." The white-clothed boy raised his eyebrows. Originally, he still wanted to find Gu Hai and see the Dokoroku Kusha, but he didn't want to. But he actually came on his own. How could he be here? It shouldn't be. Shouldn't he be in Chaos City? Qing Feng said doubtfully. What's his name? Gu Hai, Qing Feng explained. Gu Hai. A hint of anticipation flashed in the white-clothed boy's eyes. Gu Hai slowly walked outside the grand formation. The 4 directions were already set up. However, Gu Hai still had to determine who was trapped in the grand formation. If it wasn't Immortal One, there was no need to risk himself. Great brilliant dynasty. Hey Yan. Gu Hai let out a steep blast. Boom. The sound immediately went straight to the grand formation. In the grand formation, Fairy One fended off the surrounding vampires as she plucked the strings of her zither. But, as the days and nights of plucking came down, Fairy One was also a bit tired, and a wave of depression flashed through her eyes. Fairy One, we don't ask for much, as long as we know the way to refine the drought demon fire poison. It must not be too difficult for you. If we delay any longer, my group of subordinates will be able to reach you, Xian sneered. HMPH. Fairy One let out a cold snort. Lord Qin and I can give you a chance, but these subordinates of mine, who have just been demonized, their minds are still confused. They won't be able to do much nonsense with you. Under my silencing formation, how long can you hold out? Shi Yan sneered. A wave of depression flashed through Fairy One's eyes. Now, if she wanted to escape, the only way was to signal for help. However, she had bet with her master at first that she would definitely not ask for help during this adventure, and that she would have to overcome any difficulties on her own. But in front of her eyes, these vampires, that ugly face, were getting closer and closer. Fairy One was a little confused for a moment. There was also that tiger eyeing Qin Zibai. When a fairy's face was gloomy. A few days down the road, the anxiety in her heart was also getting more and more prevalent, gradually generating a sense of helplessness. Now if only someone would come to her rescue. For some reason, the first thing that came to mind was not the master. Instead, it was that Gu Hai who made himself gnash his teeth. Bastard, aren't you responsible? Why don't you come? It's only lip service. Immortal, when you whispered and counted Gu Hai, hoping to drive out the figure of Gu Hai that kept popping up in her mind, constantly thinking about the badness of Gu Hai. It looked like she was about to expel Gu Hai from her mind. Steeply a loud cry came in from outside the grand formation. Great brilliant imperial dynasty, Shi Yan. The large formation isolated the internal sounds, but the external sounds could be heard, and Gu Hai let out a loud shout, immediately startling the faces of the people within the large formation. Ancient Sea's voice. That's right. It was definitely Gu Hai's voice. Immortal One had actually counted Gu Hai in earlier when she kept counting. Dead beat. You really came. Fairy One's face changed. In the next moment, Fairy One realized that her tone was wrong. Her face flushed and she immediately changed her tone. Bastard, why did he come? Earlier, expelling the image of Gu Hai in her mind did not work, and a voice from Gu Hai seemed to have instantly made its image even more profound. It instantly shocked his own count to pieces. There was only one voice in his mind. He came to save me. He heard my voice and came to save me. He said he was responsible. The feeling of helplessness in her heart suddenly vanished, and in her bewilderment, Fairy One suddenly felt her heart beating rapidly, a PFFD and theft. He's coming. He's coming. Fairy One's zither sound was getting faster and faster. The sound of the zither all carried a pleasant flavor. Gu Hai. Why is he here? Qin Zibai's face sank. Qin Zibai's impression of Gu Hai was profound. In the past, when he retreated from Chaos City, he was incredibly unwilling at that time. How long had it been? And they were meeting again. Looking for me. Shi Yan, however, raised an eyebrow. Hu, with a wave of his probing hand. The fog in front of Shi Yan was suddenly hazy. While the outside couldn't see the inside could now see the outside. It's really him. A flicker of color flashed in Feriwana's eyes. Qin Zibai's face was gloomy. Shi Yan frowned slightly. However, he saw that outside the grand formation, above Gu Hai's right hand, he was grasping a long bronze sword. His face was ice cold, and he was looking at the grand formation dead on. What? Don't even dare to answer, Gu Hai said coldly. Great Han Dynasty, Gu Hai. What are you doing here? Shi Yan said coldly. Shi Yan's voice steeply troubled out. At the same time, the sound of the zither and the vampire's roar from the interior also came out intermingled. Gu Hai's pupils shrunk. There was indeed a fierce battle going on inside. Hey, ha ha ha, what am I doing here? This is to ask the person you trapped. You really have a lot of guts. Gu Hai's face sank. The inner Feriwana's eyes lit up. Was Gu Hai really here for me? Qin Zibai and Shi Yan, however, had slightly sunken faces as they glanced at each other. Gu Hai he knows, Qin Zibai said unexpectedly. Shi Yan's face also looked odd for a moment. So what if he knows? But is Gu Hai and Feriwana familiar? I remember the previous information. They were enemies. Oh. The duo looked towards Feriwana. Gu Hai came for you, Shi Yan said in a deep voice. HMPH. I'm not familiar with him. Feriwana remained stubborn. Shi Yan twisted his head to look outside the large formation. Gu Hai, are you looking for nothing? Come to stir up my situation. Gu Hai wanted to find out who was trapped inside, so he could only call out again. Huh. Nothing to do. Did you ask him? He said that I have nothing to do. Shi Yan looked at Feriwana. And you said you don't know him well. Who are you fooling? Let me talk to him, Feriwana said in a deep voice. Feriwana twisted her head and coldly glanced at Qin Zibai. There was only Gu Hai in the outside world. And if Gu Hai was messing around, he wasn't even a match for Qin Zibai. Just in case. Hu. Shi Yan waved his hand, letting Feriwana's voice go out. Gu Hai, who asked you to come? Come from wherever you are and get lost. It's not your turn to meddle in my affairs. Feriwana shouted in desperation, hoping to drink Gu Hai away. However, when Gu Hai suddenly heard Feriwana's words, he let out a long breath. Sure enough, it was her. Since it was Feriwana, how could he possibly leave? Touching the long sword in his hand, Gu Hai said with an icy face, Hey Yan. It's fine for the lord of the Great Huang Dynasty to be willing to be a dog of Great Yuan, but to actually set up a large formation to deal with a weak woman. Hehe, good, trapping Feriwana. I will announce what you have done to the world. The internal Shi Yan's face sank. The reason for using a large formation was that he didn't want the news to leak out. If Gu Hai announced it to the world, wouldn't it be a lost cause? Gu Hai is only at the beginning of the Yuanying realm, and he's not in Cheoja City. He can't turn the tide. Just be careful with one of his string puppet poles and the undying divine flame, Qin Zibai said in a deep voice. That can't be kept either. You guys, go take Gu Hai down for me. Shi Yan pointed at a group of vampires and said, Yes, boom. 20 vampires rushed out of the large formation with a bang.